Dalton, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. And I would like to welcome our audience to our live webinar entitled Ask ProVisor. So today we are doing transparent talks for real estate professionals. My name is James Mercado. I'm the president of ProVisor. Been in this crazy business for over 25 years. It's very rewarding and it can be very challenging. So wherever you're at in your journey in your career, one thing that I can assure you is we're going to bring valuable knowledge for you. So when you're out in the field, you can make sure that you are helping your clients the best that are possible and differentiate yourself as a consummate professional. So I always tell people the more you learn, the more you earn. So today we're here to learn a few things. Our special guest is Dalton, and he is the director of a national company called Condo Analytics. Welcome, Dalton. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, James?
Good. Share with our audience a brief overview of what your company does and what your role is within that company. Would you please?
Sure. So I work with Condo Analytics here. I've been the director for about 2 years now. We do a variety of different condo reviews, project reviews, customers all around the country. So we deal with, of course, many different condo environments as well, with the different requirements and whatnot. But that's our main focus, mainly doing, conventional Fannie Freddie as well as FHA. So that's our main focus, doing project reviews for under those parameters.
Well, excellent. We are excited to pick your brain. You have a excellent reputation in the industry. Your company is second to none. You guys are the go-to when it comes to condominiums. So there's a lot of valuable information that you have that we want to know. All right.
Awesome.
And
yeah.
Our audience wants to know it. So sometimes people say, why are you doing this, James? Why is ProVisor doing this? And the biggest reason I think is we want to help differentiate our real estate agents so they can bring value, expertise, and knowledge so they're better equipped when they're out there serving their clients. So, as rates come down and we start to get ourselves into a very competitive spring market, we need to understand how condos work because there's a lot of changes recently, and a lot of people aren't even aware of the changes. So today is a little bit more of an academic thing, and it's important that we can glean as much knowledge from you. So let's jump in, Dalton, okay?
Sure.
All right, here's the first question that was presented to us. Can you please tell us about the process of reviewing condo docs to be able to say a condo meets Fannie or Freddie rules? Would you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. And we could get pretty into the weeds with this, but I'll try to give you kind of a 30,000-foot view here.
Talk to us like we're in 5th grade.
Yeah, sure. So basically, what it comes down to, of course, as far as documentation requirements go, is are we dealing with a limited or a full review? Those are kind of the big question you have to ask on the front end. And what determines that is going to be factors like, your loan to value, the occupancy type, things of that nature go into kind of a pool of factors that contribute to either being a limited or a full review. So I'll kind of go through kind of what we're looking for with each of those. So limited review, as it kind of you would assume is a little bit easier. I say easier, it's a little less required. So basically what we'll be needing with a limited review is obviously the questionnaire. And then basically we just need to verify, property coverage for the master insurance policy for the project. And then any additional items that may, be required based on the addendum, which I know we'll get to that a little bit later. But so really it's only a couple things that you need with the limited review. So that, of course, is the most desirable route if possible. Now, if we go to a full review, this is where we get a little more into the weeds here. It's a little more nuanced. So with a full project review, we'll be looking at, of course, the questionnaire, as always. We'll have to review the budget. So there's different factors related to the budget that have to be reviewed. We'll have to review additional insurance coverage for the master policy for the project. We'll have to be looking at property liability and fidelity coverage, against the budget for different factors there, as well as some GovDocs items, things like that. So of course, basically, and then just to mention as well, there's other little factors as well in the full review. Just for as an example, no more than 15% of the unit owners in the project can be more than 60 days delinquent on dues. So it's little things like that as well in the full review. So that's kind of what we're looking at, with like I said, with the limited review, it's much more just kind of a scan over of just kind of a couple items here and there with a lot less, kind of nuanced requirements. And with the full review, we really get into dig into the project and have to meet these certain percentages and things like that, as far as
Dalton,
stuff like that.
Does this, so do you guys do this? Does Condo Analytics work with like federally chartered banks and national mortgage companies, or just mortgage brokers or independent mortgage bankers, or pretty much anybody that uses?
Anybody, anybody
Okay.
trying to get conventional financing or or HUD approval, things of that nature. We'll work with anyone. So again, from our perspective, we're looking at just project approval. We're not looking at loan approval, things like that. So kind of what you do with it after you receive our review is kind of up to you. So that allows us to be pretty flexible with who we can work with. So,
and are the rules the same for every lender when it comes to working with the Fannie and Freddie rules? Are they the same, or do they change by lender or lender type?
Yeah, so they're the same. Again, and we try to make a point to not necessarily to really stick to the guidance. Our reviews from our perspective are obviously everyone might have their own overlays and things of that nature, but we really stay directly to the guide from our perspective.
Okay.
So it's pretty much all the same with everything.
So your review goes straight to Fannie, straight to Freddie. There's no extra overlays. Each lender could have their additional rules on top of it, but you're giving us straight guidelines.
Yep, straight guidelines, and what you do with it, after that, of course, is up to you. But from our position, we're going straight guidelines, so nothing really changes, other than, of course, geographical requirements of different states, things like that. Perhaps like with Florida has some more strict requirements and things like that, but there's nothing necessarily lender specific that we run into.
Okay, that's interesting, because ProVisor, we go straight guidelines as well. But I know that there's a lot of lenders out there that once they get this review back, they have extra rules to try to mitigate their risk, but that has nothing to do with you. You're given the baseline. We adhere to what you guys say, so we're going to do exactly what you say, but there's some of our competitors out there do add extra rules to that, and they have the right to do that. Sure. So here's the next question I got for you, Dalton. Sure. What are some items that you see that frequently, well, not the 1 in a million, but the stuff that's more normal, that cause a condo that will not meet the Fannie or Freddie rules? Give me a couple examples, like, hey, this is going to be a problem for you.
Sure.
This is think easy. Like a real estate agent when they're getting ready to list a condo, or they're getting ready to show a condo. Like, hey, if I'm a real estate agent and I'm in the field and my client wants to see this, what's some things that I need to be, what are some red flags?
So, from my perspective, this would have to be obviously not so much of, visual, maybe just being at a project, being able to tell these kind of things. But so as far as when I'm looking at doing reviews and looking at all the documentation, there's 3 things that always kill a project.
Okay.
Litigate, or not always, but are typically our biggest issues. Litigation, that's almost one of the first things I would ask an HOA if I was, working with a seller or things of that nature. I would say, hey, are you guys involved in litigation right now? Because that is a huge red flag. It's very difficult to get around, and has many requirements tied to it. And that's something we see all the time that kills projects. And that's full or limited reviews, anything. If they're in litigation, just to give you a quick kind of flyover. So when you have a project involved in litigation, we either have to verify that the insurance carrier for the project is covering it, or that they have a known settlement amount, and verify how it affects their basically financial standing. So if we can't get that information, if the litigation has just started, they don't really know what's going on with it, things like that, automatically dead. So it's just kind of one of those things that's honestly the first thing I would ask. Second, obviously repairs, deferred maintenance, which I know is a big topic of today, kind of a little down the line here. But, if the project has ongoing repairs, and sometimes you can see those visually, walking around a project. If you're seeing a bunch of work going on in a project, of a construction nature, things like that, that's a bit of a red flag. Fannie and Freddie are going to be looking at those things like, are the balconies being repaired? Roof being repaired, things like that. Have to verify that all of that's been complete or is satisfactory. So that's a big thing, deferred maintenance. And then a little more into kind of the the finer details, the documentation. Insufficient insurance coverage is a huge killer. We see that all the time, especially on full reviews. The fidelity coverage, which is basically fidelity coverage, to give you an idea, is uh, basically theft, employee dishonesty, kind of coverage like that. They're required to have a certain amount of that coverage based on the budget. So those are kind of the big three things that I see on my end that, excuse me, that unfortunately kill a project. So that would be, I guess, from the perspective of maybe the realtor side. So if you can get information from the HOA on litigation standing, make sure that's not there. That's a huge obstacle out of the way. If you can get information on, any ongoing repair projects, things like that are noticeable, that's a big thing. And then additionally, if you are speaking to the HOA about the litigation already, I'd ask about special assessments. Special assessments on the unit owners are a huge issue now, based on the nature of it. If they have a special assessment for, excuse me, the insurance went up for the project and they just need to, supplement to cover it this year, that's fine. That's within guidelines. If they have a special assessment because they just had an inspection and all the siding's failing or something like that, or the roof's failing, something like that, then at that point, that's going to be a big obstacle to get around. So those are just kind of a couple things you could potentially speak with HOA about on the front end or the management company.
That's actually good for the listing agent to ask those questions. So that way, when the buyer's agent calls them, they can just say, let me tell you about three things. The three key things are litigation, deferred maintenance, and underinsured. Check, check, check. We're good. Or, hey, we're underinsured right now, but just so you know, we're in the process of getting that rectified. Let your lender know that we are increasing the policy. So that would be good for the listing agent to know and the buyer's agent to ask the correct questions for those listing agents who are not on the call today.
Yep.
Great.
And that'll get you a good ways into. It's never an assurance that of course it would be an eligible project, but that's a big step out of the way if you know that those.
Well, those are three big rocks, so we start there. It solves a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
All right, come back with me. Last fall, Fannie and Freddie revealed new rules about lenders needing to review meeting notes or structural reviews in the complex or a 3-year history of building inspections. Familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Are you able to share with us what caused that change?
Yes. So a couple of different things. I think the most obvious that they don't like to admit, but I'm pretty sure it's the case. Obviously, the building collapse in Florida a couple of years ago has brought on these new requirements, with the deferred maintenance to make sure that there's, the building's up to code and things of that nature. From another perspective,
so that building that collapsed in Florida, for those who don't know, that was a condo project that, I don't know, structurally collapsed.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. They had a severe concrete spalling, which is where the concrete gets, water intrusion, things of that nature, and loses its integrity and basically just collapses after a while. So definitely very scary. And you'd honestly be surprised at how many projects I've denied for that exact reason, where they're just leaving stuff like that, just pending. And obviously we see how disastrous it can be.
Right.
But, that's kind of, I think, the most obvious answer. But with, from a different perspective as well, and this is kind of the one side of it that I do see where they're coming from with this. Basically, as Fannie Mae described it, they've run into instances in the past where, and this kind of goes back to the special assessment item where, you get a borrower in, that you get the loan closed, great, everyone's all happy, big success. And then a week later, they have some kind of repair project where the borrower gets hit with a $10,000 special assessment or something of that nature. So what they're trying to do is with these new requirements is really try to just make sure that there's no surprises for the borrower and for them as well, since they're also tied to that transaction. So they just want to make sure that when we get into a project, when we get a loan approved, that there's not going to be some unfortunate financial or safety strain on the borrower that affects that transaction at that point.
Yeah.
So it is, from that perspective, it does make a lot of sense, even though it is certainly a little inconvenient to have to get all this additional information. But those are kind of the two kind of main things, safety and, financial stability, basically.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, safety's kind of a big deal. I mean, there's liability on everybody's part of this. If the due diligence isn't performed properly and you put a family in there and structurally it's not sound, that's very dangerous. So
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, we may not like the extra work that it's caused us in our industry, but if it's saving lives, then, then it's worth it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, and again, like I said, you wouldn't believe the things that we do run across, during our reviews and things like that, where you're just like, because the unfortunate nature of a condo is you are having to rely on people that you don't really interact with to maintain, to maintain so much of it.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't believe some of the stuff that just gets swept under the rug. And really is, I certainly wouldn't want, my family to be in some of those situations. So I do certainly understand where they're coming from with these
So
new requirements.
when the real estate agent or the loan officer says, I've been doing this for 20 years, I've never heard of such a thing. These are newer rules, right, Dalton?
Yep, absolutely. They like we were kind of talking about earlier. They just went into permanent policy in September, so that was the big
Okay.
change there. Really these requirements have been in place since the beginning of last year, really kind of in the February to March range. But it was
Mhm.
more so it wasn't necessarily a permanent policy guideline. It was more so of a, hey, this is what we're looking for now. You really need to be giving us this, and kind of up to their discretion, kind of how deep they wanted to dig into it. But yeah, now as of
Yeah.
September, it's a firm requirement that needs to be met. So
Okay, that's good to know. So
yeah,
it's not a ProVisor rule, it's a Fannie
yeah,
Freddie rule.
yeah. It's
So
not
we just
just
had somebody from our live audience ask a question, and the question says, what document does a condo association need to provide to show there are not safety issues? Does that
okay, great.
exist?
Yeah, absolutely it does. So the questionnaire form for Fannie Mae, which is really the kind of end all be all questionnaire. We typically use it. We typically never use a Freddie Mac questionnaire, really. Most places will do the Fannie one. It's called Form 1076. And along with that comes an addendum. So it used to not be required unless there was known issues in the project. You'd have to get it completed. But this was what became permanent policy, is that the projects now have to complete this addendum form, the 1076 addendum. And that will basically has a list of questions and check boxes you have to hit that say, are you aware of any, jurisdictional requirements that the project has yet to fulfill as far as, code inspections, things of that nature. Basically, have you had an inspection in the past couple of years? Are there any current special assessments? Are you aware of any deficiencies in the project? It's a whole list of questions right there. And that's the first thing I look at when I get a questionnaire, is to see if they completed that addendum, so we can immediately know right off the bat, hey, they marked there's no deficiencies, they have a funding plan for any maintenance, this is what the reserve account balance is. It gives you that full picture right there. So like I said, if you go to the 1076 addendum Fannie Mae form, we'll have all of those questions right there. And it might be a good thing to kind of have available to go ahead and send to an HOA, or say, have that information on the front end if possible. So it's available to everyone.
So just for clarification purposes, for maybe some of our newer people that have not been doing this quite as long, who fills that out? Does the listing agent fill it out? Does the association fill it out? Does an attorney fill it out? Who fills it out, Dalton?
Whoever manages the project. It could be HOA board member, or it could be a project or property manager rather. So it could be an attorney, I guess, in a case. So it just has to be whoever is managing that project. So
Okay.
it could be a couple different sources there, but certainly wouldn't come from, if you do get one from a listing agent or something like that, that would not be acceptable. Just to clarify.
So for our real estate partners out there that are listing condos, this might be something would be wise to maybe get it done up front, so that way they don't have problems down the road with lending later. Would that be safe to say?
Oh, absolutely. And, with that being said too, just because you do get it at, say you get an addendum done in January, it might not be viable next month, so it's something that if you are doing a lot of repeat business in any projects or things like that, I would, if possible, be checking in and having that updated. At the very least, asking about the special assessments is going to be the big one.
Okay.
Asking about that, frequently, saying, hey, has anything changed? Do you have any upcoming projects? Special assessments, things like that. So that's kind of how I would approach that, if
Yeah,
possible.
it's good to have clear and current communication, so that also reduces liability for everybody. So, all
Yep.
right, next question for you. Can you explain the new requirements regarding the exterior inspections and the structural reports from both the sellers and the buyer side?
Sure, sure. And I know there's quite a bit of confusion about this. Kind of has been
Yeah,
throughout the year.
yes, sir.
So the way the guidelines read and how the requirement is basically is that if you've had a structural inspection on the building within the past 3 years, we must obtain it. It must be provided for review. If it is not provided, it is an automatically ineligible project, and that is kind of the bottom line. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you've had a structural inspection in the past 3 years, it must be provided for review. And sometimes, worth noting, sometimes on the addendum, they'll mark, yeah, we had an inspection last year, and it might have just been an insurance inspection for a roof or something like that. Don't really care about that kind of stuff. As far as an actual structural inspection from, the city or something like that, those kind of things will have to have it. We actually at Condo Analytics consider a reserve study to be one of those inspections. So anytime we have a reserve study within 3 years, we have to have it. Otherwise, we will not approve the file because it is in theory, it is an inspection really. So that's kind of how I would approach it. But yeah, the actual guideline is any structural and project-wide structural inspection within 3 years must be obtained.
Do condo associations, do they normally do these inspections to meet these requirements? Or will this be a surprise to most of the associations and their secretaries and their officers when we ask for these items?
So it just depends. Basically, typically we will not see, a project, do an inspection in prep for, loan approvals and things like that or project approval. A lot of times they don't have one already. The only time we would really get them to or see them get an inspection at that time would be to clear maintenance items we're already aware of, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But there are certain areas where, and this is something that is answered on the addendum as well. There's certain areas that some jurisdictions require you to have one every 3 years, every 5 years, things like that. So really, most of the time, we'll only see a project have an inspection if they have to have one. It's not typical that they would just get one just to kind of get one. So kind of one of those things. It's a little variable there.
All right, I just want to remind our audience, if you have a question, you can post it in this forum or you can email it to me, james@provisor.com, if you want it to be a confidential question. We don't have to say it's from Susie. So just if you want to, just email me, james@provisor.com, and we'll make sure to get these questions in front of Dalton. We're here live right now with Dalton. He is the Director of Condo Analytics. He is an expert with everything condo. It is a blessing to have him here. He's a wealth of information. We got lots of questions still to move forward, but if you're tuned in late or anything, I just want to let you know that we are digging into condos right now because the rules have changed. It's ever evolving. Unfortunate that tragedy that happened in Florida was an impetus behind a lot of this. So please make sure you understand and share this video with your colleagues. So let's jump in here to the next question, Dalton. What do you do with condos that are not FHA approved, and what is needed for a single unit approval? And lastly, what's that process like for you guys?
All righty, FHA.
Yeah.
So basically, if a project is not FHA approved, single unit approval, of course, is your very best route. The big thing you're looking for here, and this is actually information you can find on HUD's website. You can look up by zip code all the projects that have had FHA approval submissions at any point in time, and they keep that list very updated. And basically, if a project to qualify for an FHA single unit approval, if a project has to have less than 10% FHA concentration in the project. So like I said, basically when we get a review, an order for an FHA single unit, we'll go straight to HUD's website. We'll do the zip code search. We'll see if that project has any submissions. If they don't, you can assume that there is no FHA concentration in the project. So that's easy. Okay. And if they do, of course, we'll verify that it's within that percentage. And then at that point, we'll go about gathering the documentation. The biggest difference between FHA and conventional financing, as far as Fannie Freddie go, is that FHA is really interested in the financials. So this is the thing that kind of kills projects as far as that review type goes, is that you have to provide at least 2 years of financial history. So while, Fannie Freddie would just want to see the budget, the current approved budget, FHA wants to see your income, your budget versus actual income expenses reports for 2 years at least, along with your year-to-date income expense report to be compared to the budget that you've made for this year to verify that there's no, fluctuations in income, no special assessments, no repairs. They want to make sure that everything is going along nice and smooth as far as the financials go. So as far as the actual questionnaire requirements, they're pretty similar to Fannie Freddie. There's not too much different there. So like I said, probably the biggest difference would just be going through all those financials and things like that as far as FHA. So as far as single unit approval, like I said, we do the review there. You send it to FHA Connect, I believe is what it is. And then basically you'll have an answer, pretty quick, couple of days kind of thing. If you had to do an actual full approval, this is where we really get into the weeds here. The full approval is a very intensive process. You have to get a lot of documentation. You have to package it up in a certain way. You have to submit it to a HUD office. And then at that point, it basically kind of sits in limbo until they approve it, which we've had some get approved in a week. We've had some get approved 40 days later. So it's it's kind of it's a lot up to chance when you actually get it back. So single unit approval obviously is always the way to go if you can meet those initial criteria. But you have a couple options there if you did need to go for approval.
Are you familiar with the cost to get a project approved? The whole project? Are you familiar with that cost from HUD or not?
So unfortunately, as far as our role goes with that, once we complete the review, it's kind of out of our hands at that point, and we have it packaged up to submit to HUD and things of that nature. But we don't actually deal with the actual submission process of it, so I'm a little unfamiliar with kind of what goes on after we kind of pass it on. So
sure.
I wish
and
I had
the
a little more specific info there.
When it comes to the single unit approval, if I'm a real estate agent and I'm listing the property and I want to be proactive, is it tied to the borrower, or can I just somehow get this single unit approved when I list the property regardless of the borrower? Forget about loan approval, just making it eligible.
Oh yeah. No borrower information would be necessary. Again, for our purposes, we're always looking at just the project, so the borrower really isn't a necessary item.
So if one of our real estate agents that are watching this right now, they said, hey, I have a condo, I would like to get it a single unit approval on that. Could they contact Condo Analytics directly, or do they have to come through us?
It would likely be easier just to go through you, but we could certainly get anyone set up, and our system is very user friendly. We could get anyone set up to make a submission, and we could review that project there for you. But if you have the opportunity, you might as well just go through you guys. Since
then just call us. We'll do it all. We'll get over to your team, Dalton, and we'll help them out for that. Great. That's good information. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Next question for you. When condos are not contributing the 10% to a reserve account, are there other ways that they can meet the Fannie Freddie rules?
Yes. So this is actually an interesting one. So this, up until a couple months ago, actually the September release, you had no option. They basically, if you didn't have the 10% allocation, you're toast. And so now, and this was actually an older guideline that they took out and are just now reintroducing again, like I said, in September. So now you have the option to, if per the budget, 10% is not being allocated to reserves, you can use a reserve study in lieu of that. And so what that'll entail is you have to have a reserve study within 3 years of the closing date. And when you look at a reserve study, it'll have a fully funded amount per each year that will basically cover all of the items that they've listed in need of, repair, replacement, whatever it may be. So say if we were using a reserve study today to clear a reserve allocation issue, we would basically go in, see what the 2024 fully funded amount would be, and the project's current reserve account must reflect that amount or in excess, of course. And at that point, you could use that as a replacement for the allocation. So it would have to be, again, reserve balance the current reserve account balance would have to equal the fully funded amount for that current year on the reserve study.
Okay, that's valuable information. I don't know how many of us were aware of that change.
Yep. Yep. It's definitely a little helpful. But also, you know, it's very rare that it works out. Let's just say that a lot of times the fully funded.
But you're saying
amount,
there's a chance, right?
they're saying there's a chance, but the fully funded amount typically are, if they're pretty high numbers usually. So they'd have to be a pretty pretty on top of their game a lot of the time to have that amount already on hand, from our experience at least.
So you're the expert today, so I'm going to ask you to maybe just speak to us candidly. What words of wisdom do you have for our real estate agents about condo association and being ready for loans that need to be done in the complex? Just what are some words of wisdom that you could share for us as we start to wind this up here?
It's a tough question, but some things I would say just in general, kind of like we talked about earlier, the more collaborative we can be with the HOAs, with the project managers, the better. You can take some of this information you learned today, maybe get ahead of some of these items, kind of keep up with some of these projects, set the expectation of what's required a little more. You wouldn't believe how often we run into it where an HOA or a project manager will respond and say, we've never had to provide this, but they have the documentation, but they're just saying, well, we've never had to provide this. We don't want to provide this, blah, blah, blah. And then, the seller perhaps will engage the seller and they'll be able to get stuff like that, So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, maybe be as collaborative as possible, get the seller involved, go to the HOA, go to the project manager, let them know, hey, we're trying to get this kind of approval. We really need you guys to help us with this, because that's another thing too, is, sometimes projects don't do Fannie or Freddie approvals. They know they're not eligible for that. And they'll tell you right on the front end, hey guys, listen, we don't do this. There's no reason for you to work, try to get this documentation. We're not eligible for this. So getting kind of on the front end, getting, be as collaborative as possible, like I said, with the HOA or the PM. And a lot of times you can get most of the information you need pretty quickly. And with that being said, another word of wisdom I would give, as far as the customer expectation standpoint, we're in a very different environment than we were, of course, a year ago. And I think we run into it a lot where people are still trying to move transactions really quickly. And I know that's always going to be the kind of the name of the game, but I would try to, we're in an environment now where condo project approvals are more difficult than ever. They require more information than ever. So, let the buyer, let the seller, know that, hey guys, listen, we're going to do this as fast as we can. But, based on the information we receive, there's many items that we may have to follow up on, things like that. We may not be able to close this thing in, 3 days or something like that, So I just would kind of set that expectation on the front end of, hey, these aren't easy. We're going to have to get a lot of information. Best case scenario, we get everything. It all looks good. Boom, we're done. Worst case scenario, on the review side, there may be quite a bit of digging that we have to do. So that's something we've been kind of recommending, especially as we enter the new year, to customers, is that, hey, set the expectation, especially this time of year. A lot of projects don't have a 2024 approved budgets, so we can't do anything there. A lot of projects are up for insurance renewal. So we have, a lot of orders right now where they're kind of just in limbo because we have to wait for the insurance to renew because it just expired, last month, that type of thing. So that would be kind of my 2 words of wisdom is, let people know that, hey, we're going to get it done, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to do now for these reviews. There's a lot of boxes we have to check, and it's for the better of, the buyer. It's for the better. These things it's necessary information we have to get. And then additionally, like I said, be collaborative, work with the HOA, work with the PM, try to help them, work with the seller, since they a lot of times have access to the board and things like that. Let them know, hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we really need from you guys. If you could help us out, it'd be great. And like I said, in some cases, they might tell you right on the front end, hey, we don't do that, or hey, no problem. Yeah, we've done this before already. We know what to send you, that kind of thing. So just kind of setting those expectations is the best thing I can relay.
Okay, that's good information. So just to recap a little bit, we're here live with Dalton. He is the Director of Condo Analytics, a national company that their whole job is to review condo associations and make them get us in a position where we can lend them, be safe, and all kinds of stuff. So if you have a question, you can post it in the chat or you can email it to james@provisor.com. We are answering live questions if you'd like to do that. We are getting ready to wrap up here, so if you want to post that quickly, that'd be great. Dalton, it has been a turbulent market, needless to say, and with the hurricanes and the problems in Florida affecting condo projects down there. For our Floridians, is there anything extra that you could share with us about the condo projects in Florida right now?
Yes. So, Florida, I believe in the next couple years has a required inspection coming up, as well
Yes,
as,
I read that.
yep. So I would, we're seeing a lot of projects already going ahead and doing that, getting that inspection done. Or the big thing we run into in Florida is 40-year research. So, every 40 years, projects in Florida have to get these inspections done. So that's probably the biggest thing we run into in Florida is just making sure that these projects are meeting the jurisdictional requirements.
Okay.
So that's kind of the big thing to look for there is hey guys, are you required to have an inspection? Have you done this? When's your 40-year research coming up? Which you can tell by mostly by the age of the project, things like that. So those are kind of some of the questions I would ask on the front end because that due to the nature of Florida, that's the biggest thing that they're looking for is that that's really the only place you run into buildings being out of code or not meeting the jurisdictional requirements for inspections and things like that. That's the main location of it. So that's the big thing I would look for as far as that goes.
All right. So simply stated, can you explain warrantable versus non-warrantable for our audience?
Yes, that seems to be kind of a buzzword recently.
Yeah, right.
Warrant. It's basically ineligible versus eligible. In
Mhm.
essence, is what it is. I wouldn't really dig into it any deeper than that. That's in essence what it is. And you'll hear a lot of people say, is this warrantable to Fannie Mae or to Freddie? And again, it's not really worth kind of digging into much more than that. It's mainly is it eligible or is it not eligible?
Okay.
In essence.
Warrantable, eligible, non-warrantable, ineligible. Synonyms. It's a better way to say it.
Yeah.
We have a question here from somebody, okay? What should I do if the condo association does not have a reserve study and currently has deferred maintenance? What do I do?
So it really just depends on so if they don't have a reserve study and they don't have deferred maintenance,
They do have.
oh, they do.
They
Gotcha.
don't have a
So
reserve study, but they have deferred maintenance.
Gotcha. So if they have deferred maintenance, this kind of gets into some of the additional documentation requirements you've probably seen, within the guides that we've kind of mentioned as far as like you would basically at that point, we like to just go straight to the HOA and just say, hey, what's the scope of the deferred maintenance? What's your plan for it? Any special assessments tied to it, things like that. And then at that point, we'll kind of go further into it. Or if they say, hey, it's already done, we'll get, work orders, things like that, verifying it's completed. You can use the HOA meeting minutes to verify that things have been completed. So I think you had mentioned the meeting notes earlier. So that's a time where you might engage. If you see some signs of deferred maintenance, you might go and get the HOA meeting minutes to see what they've been discussing as far as their plan to cover it. And in best case scenario, like I said, they've maybe already done the work and they have work orders showing it paid for, things like that. So it's really just one of those things where if they do have deferred maintenance, you just want to get in there and see what you can get. And then at that point, kind of assess. Reserve study is not necessarily required. So it's kind of one of those things, if they have one, great, we want to have it and we want to see, what potential issues might be there, or great, there's no issues. But reserve study is kind of just one of those things. It's great support to have it, but it's not necessarily a requirement, an end-all be-all kind of document, if that makes sense. Hopefully I answered that question sufficiently.
Yeah. If the association is struggling and I'm a real estate agent, I want to list one of these properties, or I'm a lender lending in these properties and they don't have what we need, do you have any recommendations on who we tell them to call to get what we need?
Could you say that again? Sorry, I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand the question.
So if a condo association doesn't have what is required for Fannie
Yeah.
Freddie approval,
Uh-huh.
and they're like, well, we don't know, we don't, let's say that it's new listing and they haven't sold the property for a while. Now with all these new rules, this president may say, well, we've never had to do that before.
Yeah,
The
sure.
rules have changed because there's been no inventory for sale in this association. How can we direct them, or who do we direct them to help get what we need? Is there companies out there, or is that something that you have resources to?
So, it's an interesting question. We, of course, could be a resource for that. We could, advise to a degree on what would be needed. Obviously, you can always reference the questionnaire itself will give you a lot of that information that you would kind of
That's
need
like a
to
roadmap, I suppose. The questionnaire would be like a
Yep.
roadmap.
It sure is. Yeah,
Okay,
you could
great.
use that to say, hey, listen, this is what we're looking for here. Whether you want to go and get an inspection or whatever it may be to cover those items, that's really kind of the easiest way to do it. Is just kind of reference that information. Sorry if you can see my dog behind me.
That's okay.
And so basically, I would do that, and then like I said, use a company like us as kind of a reference, or use, the lender you're going through as a reference. They, obviously will be running into it left and right, I'm sure, at this point.
Yes, sir.
And can kind of give you an idea of kind of where to go. But in the end, there's a couple of simple items that you can do right off the bat to meet those requirements. Whether if as far as the inspection or deferred maintenance addendum side goes, that can be easily remedied with a reserve study, inspection, whatever it may be. Budget items, basically, with a budget item, again, you go to your lender, say, hey, what am I needing to meet these budget requirements? Well, typically this is what we're looking for, and they can kind of do what they will with that and things like that. So in short, use Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines, use the questionnaire as a roadmap, use your lender, or use a company like us, Condo Analytics.
Excellent. Dalton, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to meet with us and all of our referral partners and real estate agents who are trying to learn more to be able to serve their clients better. So this has been super valuable. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. I hope you have a good day, and we're going to continue to be using your company. We love working with you. You guys are just the best in the business. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll be hosting next month. It's the second Wednesday of every month at 10 o'clock Central. Each month we bring similar topics. We want to allow you to ask questions. And next month, we're going to be hosting the president of a title and insurance company. You're not going to want to miss this because there's a lot of misnomers around title insurance and escrow and trust and all that stuff. So it's going to be very educational for you. So invite one of your friends to tune in. We are glad to be able to do this to help you while you're out there working with your clients. Once again, my name is James Mercado. I'm the president of ProVisor. We want to say thank you for tuning in and make it a great day. Good day. Bye-bye.